Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Gen Z is surging in faith. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well. We enjoy hearing from you. We're glad you're with us, getting through the news of the day. We're here each and every weekday, bright and early, doing just that. With me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Trey Phillips. That email address, by the way, I don't think I gave it. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Billy and Trey here today on the focus story. Gen Z, they're outpacing others in church attendance. Interesting story and development here.
Yeah, it is. You know, they're outpacing a lot of other generations on church attendance, but it gets a little complicated, so we'll dig into the details, but some pretty encouraging, I think, data overall about young churchgoers.
All right. And then on the main thing, Nate Bargatze is a popular comedian. He's a clean comedian, so a lot of families enjoy watching his work, but he's facing some drama just for going to a White House event. Billy and Raj have more on the details there coming up on the main thing. All right, I want to tell you about our sponsor of this podcast, CSI, Christian Solidarity International, and for 50 years, they have been standing with Christians who have been persecuted simply for having faith in Christ. And the things they do on the ground, they're providing legal aid and practical help like food and clean water and housing, medical care, and then ongoing support. This part is very critical for families who are trying to rebuild after being persecuted, oftentimes violently, either losing a loved one or maybe they've been enslaved for years at a time or imprisoned. Those sorts of things. Well, you come back from that, it's very difficult. Well, CSI is there and they are helping these Christians do just that. And they are in many of the most difficult places in the world. For example, in Pakistan, they're there. Lots of blasphemy charges and things like that happen in Pakistan. And so they're with the Christians there. In Sudan, they're continuing to work home. A lot of people from that civil war have been enslaved, believe it or not, for many, many years. And they have rescued tens of thousands of those people and those Christians who've been enslaved. Obviously, Nigeria, we reported on that a lot. Those Islamist attacks are happening. And so they are there on the front lines helping those people recover as well. If you want to walk alongside those efforts, it's real easy. All you have to do is go to csi-usa.org/quickstart, and you can make a difference and stand with your brothers and sisters in Christ. Learn more at csi-usa.org/quickstart. All right, we are going to go to the news in 90 seconds now. And a Texas judge who refused to perform same-sex weddings because her Christian beliefs, she scored a big legal victory and a six-figure payout. Judge Diane Hensley at $640,000, including $10,000 in damages and $630,000 in attorney fees, after finding this Texas State Commission improperly disciplined her over refusal to officiate same-sex marriages. Hensley is a Waco judge and had offered couples referrals to other officiants at the same price, saying she wanted to respect both her faith and the needs of those seeking ceremonies. The court also permanently barred the commission from investigating or punishing Hensley for declining to perform same-sex weddings based on her religious convictions. And in an era where we're seeing some declining church attendance, most Americans still say religion's good for the country, and many want more of it, not less. A new Gallup survey found 65% of Americans believe the nation would be better if it were more religious. That's down from 75% in 2013, but still a solid majority. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And those kind of surveys, and Billy, I know you're about to get into some more numbers here as well, but some of these surveys, like this one here, when they use the word just like religion, kind of makes me cringe a little bit, because what does that mean? What are people thinking when they answer that question? Are you saying is that if there's more Islam here, you're going to be super thrilled about it? I don't know. So if they're meaning Christianity in general, well, then those are encouraging numbers as well. But certainly when it comes to how you want a society to be governed, and whether it's from, the government taking laws and basing those laws in a Christian ethic and framework. It's always better when we're operating as a society under God's rules and God's ways. It's just going to work out better. And at least for the moment, it seems like a good number of people recognize that.
You want to get people to at least that point so that you can bring them to the Christian side, right? If you can at least say there's a God, we're accountable to him. I remember S.E. Cupp years ago saying as an atheist, she wouldn't vote for an atheist for president because she wanted somebody who was fearful of, the Almighty, of something above themselves. If that's a starting place, it's not obviously a salvation that you want. You want people to embrace Jesus for salvation, but you can kind of work back from that. That's a lot easier than, there is no God, there is no higher power. So I think it's encouraging at the very least that people have a positive view, but we have to get them beyond this Unitarian Universalist ideal that everything is equal. And so, that's a call to the church to step up and make that happen, honestly, and educate and disciple people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think we need to have that foundational belief in a higher power and in morality. In fact, it just reminds me, some of those numbers, Dan, reminds me of George Washington in his farewell address when he left office, saying that belief in a God and belief in an absolute moral principle is indispensable to the success of the country. Our Constitution has to be interpreted through the lens of a belief in a higher power, otherwise it's going to crumble. And I think we've seen evidence of it eroding because of a lack of belief in a God. So I think that, I would much rather have the starting point of, I believe that religion is a good thing for a society, and then we can build upon that as Christians. The job then is for Christians, like you were saying, Billy, to seize on that opportunity and say, okay, it's good that you believe in the need for trust in a higher power. Now let me expose to you who that higher power is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we'll certainly be keeping an eye on those numbers and give you updates as they come along. But for now, we're going to go into some more numbers here on the focus story. And as mentioned at the top there, Gen Z is outpacing some other generations when it comes to church attendance frequency and in sharing about Jesus. So tell me about the details here.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Now we're talking about church goers, right? So Gen Z church goers, people who are going to church. When you break them down generationally, let me just read you a little bit of a quote here. This will sort of help people understand. While the median churchgoer in each generation attends 4 worship services each month, the average Gen Z churchgoer attends a worship service with their church 6.2 times a month. That's compared to 4.8 times for millennials, 5.1 for Gen Z, and 4.5 for baby boomers and those who are older. So basically, this means that while the typical Gen Z churchgoer attends at a similar frequency to other generations, there is a portion of young adults who attend at much higher rates. So that's obviously very interesting because it's not just church services. They're also more likely than any other generation to attend small groups more routinely. So, small groups, Bible study groups, they go an average of 5 times a month, and millennials are just 3.7, Gen Z 2.7, and baby boomers and those who are older 2.5. It makes sense that the older people might go less for health reasons maybe, but millennials and Gen X obviously being much lower. So that's really interesting. By the way, 36% of these Gen Z churchgoers, they report having regular responsibilities at their church more than any of the other generations. So they're going to church more, they're going to small groups more, and they're more engaged in responsibilities with their church.
And what do the stats look like in terms of sort of applying and practical application of faith?
Yeah, this also gets very, very interesting because practical application, there's a lot of different areas where this stands out, spirit-led things. The first thing I would think about is the Bible itself. 22% of Gen Z churchgoers that they study the Bible daily. That's a higher percentage than for any other generation. It's 18% for millennials, 14% for Gen X, and 15% for boomers and those who are older. And so let me give you some more numbers here. This is really interesting. I'm going to read part of the report. In the past 6 months, they are also the most likely to, or among the most likely to have served someone who they knew could not repay them, memorized a Bible verse, fed the hungry, visited the sick or homebound, fasted, and invited an unchurched person to church. So, that's pretty amazing when you look at those numbers. to sort of break that down, sharing Jesus is also important to them. They're the most likely generation to share Jesus with others. Millennials are a close second.
And so what are some of the more concerning numbers? Those are some of the more encouraging ones. What are the concerning ones?
Okay, so the concerning ones are across the board, some things that have to do with struggles with doubt. Now, Gen Z tends to struggle most with doubt about faith and about different theological constructs at the core of Christianity. They're more likely to doubt God's involvement when inexplicable things happen, and they sometimes doubt God's love. God loves them and will provide for them. And so they're more likely to have issues with those things. And this obviously has a practical impact on younger American churchgoers. And just for clarity, when we talk about Gen Z churchgoers, we're talking about people aged 28 and younger. So with their higher likelihood of doubting, the report says that Gen Z churchgoers are also by far more likely to say they hesitate to share with Christian friends about their own doubts and spiritual struggles. So 53% of them are actually hesitant to share that they have these doubts and struggles. I would say this is actually very important to understand because it has other practical implications. 49% of young adult churchgoers, they claim that the God of the Bible isn't different from the gods presented in other faiths. That's almost half of these young churchgoers who are saying, oh no, they're all the same gods. But the thing about this, we have to remember, these young people are flocking in and they're coming in with a lot of questions. They have not been discipled. So to me, this is not so much an indictment of them as it is, oh my goodness, they're in the pews, they're serving, they're doing these things. How do we disciple them now? What are these other generations, which sadly have lower rates of engaging on all these things? What are they doing to actually help disciple these young people? So to me, it's more of a call to do that. I actually think these numbers overall are pretty encouraging, not those last few, but I think the majority of them.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, should be convicting to us all as Christians in our churches, because when we're going to church, I think a lot of times, there can be a little bit of confusion as well. As church outreach, or is it ministering to the saints? And I think church is more for, like, yes, you should share the gospel so that anybody who's visiting there and stuff could hear the gospel clearly and the good news clearly. But I think mostly it's for equipping the saints. And so when we're doing that and when we're discipling, hopefully then when these new people come in and they hear the gospel message and they hear the Bible being preached and they turn their lives to Christ, now they're being discipled. And it's not just perpetual bring people in mode and not discipling and equipping Christians. So, but it is encouraging to see that this many people are coming in. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast of just the lack of truth and acknowledgement of obvious truths that are being denied in culture at large. And so it makes sense to me, at least, that some people would be looking for truth in other areas and trying out church. And so that's the silver lining here is, hey, there are people coming in and now it's our job to disciple them.
It's similar to the conversation we were having, before we talked about this focus story, the other data showing the belief in religion being beneficial. I think it's good that we're at least getting people in the door with that. And I think similarly with Gen Z, it's good that we're getting people in the door. Like, they're more active in the church. And sometimes the reasoning isn't always the best reason. Like, well, I'm just active in church because it's the only place that I can meet new friends. It's the only place that I can engage with other people my age, whatever that the reason might be. It's still great that they're in the door and that they're clearly curious enough to show up at a church, because if there's not some level of curiosity in reading scripture or in going to a church service, a Gen Z guy or girl is not going to do it. They're doing it because there's some level of interest. So I think it's just on the church communities that they're going to, that they're involved in, to take advantage of that and say, look, how can we come alongside and help these young people understand the complex issues that they're dealing with in their life? Because they're facing a lot of difficult issues, whether it's real life trials or it's abstract conversations like what do we think about the problem of pain? Like, how do I address the fact that evil exists in the world? Look, I think it's awesome that there are people out there, young people, who are actually searching for these things, and that should overall be encouraging, I think, to all of us.
Final thoughts, Billy?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that we need to figure out, like, for a long time, it was like, how do we get people in the pews? Well, guess what? They're in the pews now. And what are you doing? Like, that's the question. And so I think we are up against a culture that is very confused and in some ways demonic and it's chaos. And then we have a Christian culture that sometimes is a little bit, I use the word demonic, but it's true. I mean, there's evil everywhere. And then you have, this subculture in Christianity that's a little bit lethargic and lazy. And what do I mean by that? I'm not trying to criticize all of us, but when you have a 4% biblical worldview in America, the church is not stepping up enough. So we got to step up more, because it's just an influx of bad information, but they're in the pews. And by the way, I think it's really cool to see that millennials tend to fall right behind Gen Z. I'm a millennial. So for me, I'm like, okay, the younger generations are in need, and by younger, I mean like 45 and below, of the truth. What are we going to do to meet them where they are?
All right. Well, it's certainly something to be praying about as more and more people are coming to church. Now, how are we equipping them as Christians and leading them in their, not only in their walk towards becoming a Christian, but then also in their sanctification process. So appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today, Billy. And we are now going to head over to the main thing. One of America's biggest comedians is suddenly finding himself at the center of some debate. Nate Bargatze, who, as I was saying before, is known for that clean comedy, is facing some controversy after simply attending a White House event. Well, Billy and Raj are here to break down the details on today's main thing.
One of America's biggest comedians is suddenly finding himself at the center of a little bit of controversy and debate. Nate Bargatze, he's known for his clean, family-friendly comedy. He's facing some backlash after attending a White House event celebrating America's 250th birthday and also President Donald Trump's 80th birthday. This was the big UFC fight that recently unfolded. And when people saw photos from the gathering that reportedly showed Bargatze with several other political and entertainment figures, it sparked criticism. Some people online said they were no longer going to support him or his work. Others defended him. Raj, let's just start here. When somebody shows up to an event and it happens to be at the White House and it's a UFC fight, why in the world are we living in an era where that becomes, I can no longer support that person? I mean, just help me understand this.
Because you said exactly what it is. We are living in an era. And as you know, if you watch this channel, I love to crack open the Bible and see what God has for us. But this one's a little bit more personal in the sense that both Billy and I have been in the media for decades. And we have to pull back the curtain a little bit. This is an era in which we are being siloed. We are being algorithmed into hearing and seeing only that which we want to see. And we're deleting friends who disagree with us. Everything that we like, the algorithm's like, oh, they like this, so let me feed that person more inflammatory, more ridiculous, more sensational understandings of their own opinion, but also demeaning and degrading and belittling that what they disagree with. Now, here's the thing. I think it's awesome to have super passionate opinions. I'm one of those people. But we have to realize that we are being, at least for the most part, giving a caricature of what the other side believes. Now, don't get me wrong. We need to know exactly what A, B, and C believe and how they're undermining the West and how they're undermining our Judeo-Christian principles. I'm not saying that we don't need to stick our head in the sands. But one thing that's been really cool about the World Cup is that 80 to 90% of the people all kind of are in this sort of the same boat, but we've allowed the algorithms to paint such a absurd depiction of what the other side believes. Now, I saw this Instagram. This is going to be a little off topic, but this reel that really resonated with me. I think it's relevant for this point, which is this mom and this daughter had differing algorithms about bears. Stay with me for a second, Billy. One of the people's algorithm was showing how bears eat people, how they're vicious, how they're deadly, and how you got to stay away from grizzlies and polar bears, and they're just horrific. And the daughter's algorithm was showing how cute black bears are and how cuddly they are, and like we shouldn't be that fearful of them. And then when the mom and the daughter got together, they had such diametrically opposite views of bears that they couldn't see through the weeds of the siloing that's happening in real time. All that to be said, if people like Nate Bargatze goes and celebrates this thing with certain politicians. I'm not saying that you have to just agree or disagree with anything, but it's this vilifying. It's this, how could you even associate? You have to understand that the media that you're consuming, by and large, the media knows that they can keep you watching if they make you angry, if they make you frustrated, if they make you outraged. And that's kind of one of the things we really try not to do here. We try to give a biblical perspective, but 99% of podcasters and news agencies are like, how can we get them so riled up that they'll keep sharing and clicking? And so I think what's happening here is simply a symptom of what's happening on the undercurrent of social media and media, where you can't even fathom that someone would have another opinion, because you're just so, your algorithms and your visual is so here that to have this is just, it's not in the realm of possibility. And so I think what's, again, really beautiful about the World Cup is like, when you put your phone down, you put down all of this garbage and you're just like, hey, how you doing, man? Good. You? Oh, but you're like totally normal. Like, yeah. And like, we like can get along. I just think that we have to understand that technology is dividing us. It's like this like weird social Marxism that's been imbued on our devices. So that's why I have to crack open a little bit of scripture, Billy. Do not repay evil with evil, as 1 Peter says, or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you are called, so that you may inherit a blessing. And so I don't think we should be surprised by this. This is exactly what's happening on the undercurrent of our media platforms. But again, I think if you have allowed yourself to get so pigeonholed and delete any outside voices, that to even associate with people is considered like some sort of sin of your political aisle. I'm like, gosh, I think we might be missing the point. And so I think we just need to realize that we are being manipulated, that we are being deceived, and that we are being, I don't know, this might be a bigger issue, that like pitted against each other, where again, when you just put the devices down and you go out and you have a barbecue with them, they're like, you're kind of a cool guy. I'm like, I know too, but like, I thought you were evil. I thought you were evil. And it's like, no, like we're all human, created in the image of God. Like, want a hot dog? Want a burger? You know what I mean? Like, I just think that sometimes, and it's funny I'm saying this as a member of the media and you're watching a video of ours, turn this stuff off sometimes and just like be with human beings without these devices. Because I think when we do, we realize, oh, like, I see your point now. Let's have a discussion. So that's what I think is happening, Billy. I think people are just they're so one-sided in their algorithms that they can't even realize that this is that, again, to go back to this specific instance, more than half the country voted for this way. And yet, like, are we going to alienate and say all hundreds of millions of you are evil and Nazis? It's like, come on, let's be a little bit more intellectually rigorous, a little bit more intellectually honest, and allow ourselves to hear, I know it's scary, but opposing opinions, and just be for a second. Turn off the devices. I'm sounding like a dad, Billy. I apologize, but I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, Nate Bargatze has nothing to apologize for going to an event. If he's a UFC fan and he wanted to be there, who cares that it's at the White House? Who cares that there's politicians there? This absurdity that everybody who shows up somewhere has to agree, like, it doesn't mean you agree with every single thing that is happening. It doesn't mean it was not a political move. He doesn't even talk about politics in his bit, because even though he personally likes politics, it's not something I think, I don't want to speak for him, but from what I've seen him say, he feels is important to do. Showing up to an event is not a big deal. The fact that people are so triggered and so in need of a safe space, this is why when we had the whole snowflake conversation, we would laugh about it, but we really have all become snowflakes. We are so afraid we're going to melt when anything happens that is the opposite of what we want it to be. We're going to panic. We're going to say, don't support his comedy because he showed up to a UFC fight at the White House. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of people did defend him as well. But I think as Christians, we should not be out there. Imagine if Jesus treated every single person this way. They sinned. We're all sinners. So, well, they can't be around. We can't talk to them. We can't. It's like, it's insanity. And I'm not saying that because I think there's anything wrong with this administration or anything. What I'm saying is the idea that we cannot be around it's not just us. We don't want other people to be around the people we disagree with. We don't want other people to talk to the people we disagree with. We don't even want them to show up to a UFC fight. You know, everything you said, Raj, I second it, but we've got to be mature adults. This is not mature adulting when this is how we respond to a comedian simply showing up somewhere and then we see him in photos. He wasn't even posting about it, from what I understand. These were photos that were posted by other people, and that's where the reaction came from. I mean, imagine had he dared post that he went to this UFC event. So we've got to, you know, I'm going to conclude this. Be better. We've all got to be better. That's the end.
All right, guys, appreciate that conversation there. And if you want to check out that full video, go ahead and head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. And listen, we're all dealing with algorithms at this point when you're talking about YouTube and all the social media. So why don't you go ahead and help us out with the algorithm and watch that video like 6 times? I don't know. Do something to help stunt the algorithm and let it show more Christian content to people out there because it's... I got to say, in this line of work at times, it is a little frustrating dealing with an algorithm and it's this weird thing that's behind the curtain. You don't know exactly what it's doing. But go ahead and check out the CBN News YouTube channel. A lot of great content over there. Make sure you make it a daily stop. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We've got John 14:6. Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so, you know, sorry, 49% of Gen Z churchgoers, but there's only one God. And, you know, Jesus is the answer.
Absolutely. Good reminder to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yep. And but I always love that verse because for all the softies out there who say, well, Jesus is all inclusive. I'm like, well, actually... No, pretty divisive there. It's exclusive. No one comes to the Father except through me. So if you haven't yet made that decision to give your life to Christ, now is the time to do that. All right, that's where we're going to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll see you back here tomorrow with more. God bless. Enjoy the rest of your day.